All right, folks, welcome to Ask the EFF. It is the last session for the day for this room, so I'm sure everyone is feeling incredibly fresh and focused and wide awake. Yeah, raise the roof for the EFF, by the way. So for this talk, we won't be using Slido for Q&A, but there will be Q&A. We'll be running a mic around the room. Yeah, that's it. Take it away. Oh, hold on. Yeah, David, can you? There it is, please.
Test. Okay. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for coming to Ask the EFF. My name is Kurt Opsahl. I'm the General Counsel and Deputy Executive Director at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I assume that many of you came to this and did so because you knew what EFF was, but briefly for those who are new, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to defending your rights online. We work to defend privacy, free expression, innovation. We try and make a future that you would want to live in and push back against the dystopias that seem to threaten us all. So we're going to very briefly go down the line here so we can introduce our lovely and talented panel. And then it's going to turn it over to your questions. We only have 25 minutes, so we're going to keep our introductory statements brief to allow time for whatever questions you may have. So just a quick word about the questions. One of the things we do is provide legal advice for a lot of people actually in the security community, amongst others. This is not the time or the place to ask legal questions about your situation. You want those things to be an attorney-client privilege communication. We should have those conversations separately and privately. This also includes if you say, well, hypothetically, if there was somebody, not me, that probably is you, and that's also not where you want to go. And that actually a good segue. One of the things that I do with EFF is the Coders' Rights Project, where we represent security researchers who have questions about their legal issues that they may face in doing the research and in presenting the research. I also work with Jamie on this project. If you do have questions about your own situations, feel free to reach out to us either after this talk or just by emailing info@eff.org, and we'll see what we can do to help you understand that situation. With that, I'll turn it down to Alexis.
Hello, my name is Alexis Hancock. I am a staff technologist at the EFF. I am a lead developer on the HTC Everywhere web extension for the Chrome and Firefox browsers. We are also packaged within Tor, if you may or may not know, and also included with Brave browser. I've been working on this project for a little over a year and a half, and I also do a lot with the security education companion that we have and the SSD companion that we have, where we have a lot of tutorials on different technologies and tools, but I mainly focus on Tor for Linux, Windows, Mac, and now Android. And that's about it from me. I also do a lot of security research on the side for privacy scanning on consumer devices. So a lot goes on there where I try to implement and track things that go on in the background. But either way, I'll hand it over to my coworker here.
Hi, I'm Hayley Tsukayama. I'm legislative activist at EFF. I'm on the activism team. I focus primarily on state-level legislation, so if there is a good bill that we're trying to support or a bad bill that we're trying to stop and you get our emails, that's my name on the email.
Hi, I'm Jamie Williams, and I'm a staff attorney at the Electronic Frontier obviously. I do a lot of work on free speech and civil liberties issues, and also the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. As Kurt said, I do work on the Coders' Rights team, advising security researchers. Our legal team on the whole does a lot of work in, we file amicus briefs across the country when there's new big issues of tech and law, and it's going to be a groundbreaking decision. We try to file amicus briefs in all those cases. We also have some of our own cases. And some of the issues I've been working on recently are compelled decryption, also smart cities, and I'm testifying on Tuesday, for instance, on an issue that Hayley's working with cities trying to get access to real-time trip data for scooters and other shared mobility devices. It's a range of different issues.
Hi, I'm Daly. I'm a staff technologist, and I work on Privacy Badger, which is a browser extension privacy-focused that blocks third-party trackers. Oh, and I also work on like the Security Education Companion and the Surveillance Self-Defense Guides.
All right, so that gives you a brief overview of some of the things that we're working on, which hopefully was enough to inspire some questions. Do we have a first question? Who wants to be bold? I see someone in the far back.
Also, we can't see any of you,
Can't-
so
like this,
speak up.
basically, I'm blinded. So,
I recently joined a startup. They collect a lot of customer data. As you might expect, that they get.
can we get that mic on?
David, can you check the handheld? David down there? David's not down there.
All right.
All right, so yeah, I'll repeat the question and just,
Yeah, recently joined a startup. They've got a lot of customer data. They get requests from the government. Up until now, they were just sort of rubber stamped and they filled them. I'm now an attorney at the company, so I want to start a policy of actually reviewing subpoenas, properly validating warrant sufficiency, and most importantly, notifying customers when we get a subpoena, because I've got that line on that says, please do not disclose the existence of the other. Please being the most important word. So advice on current sort of industry standard, what are the cool kids doing? How do you sell this to the higher level to make sure that we're not picking a fight for no reason? Obviously, it's the right thing to do, but there's not a lot of incentive within the company to pick a fight for no reason. So how do I do that safely in a way that we can improve customer privacy, but not get ourselves either on the wrong side of the law or just get somebody to figure it out and sort of ruin their day?
great question. So I'll repeat it for those who might not have heard. The question was about working for a company and wants to make sure that the company is doing best practices when it comes to securing the customer data, protecting them when the government comes knocking, to be sure that if a subpoena comes in, it's a valid subpoena, that if notice can be given to the customer, that the notice goes out, and how to do those best practices. And so this is a great question because this is something we care so much about. The EFF has been trying to push for these best practices for many years. In fact, we have a project called the Who Has Your Back project, which is about 10 years old and has given out shiny gold stars to companies that adopt some of these best practices for notification, for requiring a warrant before handing over content. And so for one part of the question, what are the best practices? So we have, you can look up the Who Has Your Back project. We've done different kinds of things with this project. So but maybe 2 years ago, we did one going over all these practices for ISPs, for the Facebooks, Twitters, telecommunications providers like AT&T. What are the practices that they should have? And they are the practices that you spoke of, that really give your customers notice, so that if they have information that is properly protected from the government, they can raise those objections. One of the things that he was mentioning in the question was, you'll get a request, and it'll say, we have this request, we want to get this customer's information, and we ask you to please kindly don't tell them about it. Well, as it turns out, the government has a process to go to a court and say, give an order saying you can't tell the customer about this information. But sometimes they don't want to do that. They don't want to go prove up to the court why it's necessary, why it meets the legal standard. They just rather ask the ISP to please not disclose it. But that doesn't have the force of law. And so what I think is a best practice there is to say to the government, if you think it shouldn't be told to the customer, you got to go to a court and prove it up. You got to come back with a court order saying this is, or we're going to notify. And what we ask for the companies is to notify the customer where they're legally able to do so, And if they're not legally able to do so, to do it should the gag order eventually expire. And that provides people fair notice, and the government has all the opportunities it needs to show to a court why it's not acceptable to give out the information, but it needs to make its case and prove it's right. So thank you.
Hi, I follow you on Twitter, so I had a question. Could you describe the Graham-Blumenthal proposal? It's not something I've actually seen in the news, and what we should be concerned with it.
Is it the Earn It one?
Yeah. Oh, that's like a hole in this particular panel's knowledge.
So are you talking about the encryption proposal, Earn It?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have somebody who's on our federal legislative team. Haley works on state legislative issues. But nevertheless, I have some familiarity with it because encryption is something that I do some work on. And this is a proposal that, as I understand it, is sort of the nice Section 230 you have there. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it. And what it's trying to do is tie the protections of Section 230, which service providers on the internet depend to protect themselves from liability for what the users have done, to whether or not they follow best practices. And best practices in this context are going to be determined, and they're to, in all likelihood, have a backdoor to encryption. Like they're beating around the bush, but they're not saying it explicitly, but that is the idea behind this. And they have some reasons why, well, we think this is okay. For example, there's going to be a panel of people who are going to determine what the best practices are, but if they don't determine it correctly, then the Attorney General, Bill Barr, can overrule them and just determine what the best practices are. So it's not much of a safeguard. And this is something that the government has been trying for many years, probably several decades now, in the crypto wars, to try to be able to get access to your unencrypted communications. There was a lull in the crypto wars. You could say it was crypto wars part 1 in the 90s, part 2 now. Some people would say we're in part 3. But whatever part we're in, they are definitely back, and they're interested in getting access to plain text of communications. And they want the companies to figure out a way to do that. And the funny thing is that if you make a law saying you must put in a backdoor, there actually are some reasons why that would be unconstitutional. We would put a challenge to that law, and I think have a pretty good chance of succeeding if they're saying you simply cannot have strong encryption. But instead, what they're trying to do is get around that by saying, well, you can have strong encryption if you like, but if you do so, you don't get Section 230. And Section 230 is the law that says basically that the soapbox is not liable for what the speaker has said. It's come under a fair amount of attack for a variety of reasons these days. And so they see this as a threat point for the companies. And I would say that a lot of this is about Facebook's plan to put Messenger end-to-end encrypted, and they're really upset about that. I guess I was talking about the situation, but actually, what was the specific question you asked about it?
No, just getting the details. That's perfect. Thank you.
Good. All right.
Need help finding a new question?
There's somebody here.
There's someone in the front row there.
Yeah, just let me know, and I can keep picking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like blinded, like
We're
from the left
basically,
side.
the sun is pointing
I'm right
to
here.
our eyes.
So, yeah, I just wanted to start to say first, thank you, because I use HTTPS everywhere. I use Privacy Badger. I use Let's Encrypt. So thank you so much, because I didn't pay anything for that. By the way, I just call out that it's easy to support you guys. There is a booth there, and I actually donated. So thank you. And now to my question, because that was important too. So I'm actually from Spain, so I was wondering if you guys know an equivalent to the EFF in Spain or in Europe. I know we have way stronger laws for privacy, but you guys do very important work, still will apply there. So I'm actually interested in that.
I don't know one in in Spain in particular.
Not in Spain.
There are several in Europe that we work with a lot. We do a lot of work with European Digital Rights, abbreviated EDRI, and they are an umbrella organization which has probably 30 or 40 digital rights organizations that are part of it. EFF is part of it. And so you might, if you want to find one in Spain, take a look at the EDRI site and then look at their member organizations and look for one in Spain. We've worked with a lot in other places in Europe. They're like Privacy International in the UK, like Quadrature.net in France, Bits of Freedom in the Netherlands, and many others. But I don't offhand know one in Spain.
There is a festival in Spain that happens every year. It's not necessarily an organization, I believe it's Spain-based, but the Internet Freedom Festival. They gather there every year in Spain, I believe Valencia. So the EFF normally, we have people that show up normally, I believe Daily plans on attending, and a few others from EFF plan on joining. So they have that every year in Spain if you're interested in probably getting more people who are interested in what you're interested within privacy and security within that realm.
Definitely, I didn't know about that. And I have a second question. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
There's a question way up here. I'm gonna, just give me a sec. I'm gonna get all my steps in today. Here we go.
Yeah, steps and stair
It was you, right? Yeah, you were waving me down.
You guys are one of the organizations I donate to annually. I'm very passionate about paying for open source stuff and stuff like what you're doing. So can you demystify a bit, at least to the extent you're comfortable, about your funding sources and why it's so important for, I know you have some membership dues things, but you also have just regular donators like me. So could you talk a little bit about that and how you get your money?
We're going to
All
make
right.
Kurt answer all the questions.
So, absolutely, I'd be glad to. So EFF, first of all, you can get a lot of details just going to our website. We publish an annual report that goes over various categories of funding that we have received, and you can look at that over the last number of years. We also publish our IRS Form 990s. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and so this is a tax form that details a lot of the our revenues and expenditures. So that information is available. I would say that, like, sort of overall, we get funding from a couple different sources. So one is our members. So these are individuals who join as an annual member, and it ranges. There's sort of student memberships that are at the low end, and you can have we have tiers that I think it starts out at copper, gold. We have rare earth is the highest level. So a variety of levels depending on your means. You get some great swag. You can go to the booth upstairs if you want to join as a member. In addition, we also have donors who just donate. So either because they don't want to get a membership, or and some donors who donate above and beyond the membership level just because they want to have a support. So we have some major donors who are contributing substantially. And then we have foundations. So we apply for and receive grants from foundations when they have program work that they want to see done that is something that it's appropriate for us. We might apply for that grant, and that is probably another substantial chunk of our budget. We have a couple of things which supplement that. One, if you're all familiar with the Humble Bundle. So the Humble Bundle, great place. They have a pay what you want system. And one of the things that they do is, in addition to paying for what you want for books or video games or whatever they're selling, you can decide that a certain amount of that goes to a nonprofit. So sometimes we are on their bundles, and we get actually a fair amount of money donated through that. We get a fair amount of money from individual donors who have companies they work for, who then will do matching to the donations that we receive. And we get some money from companies directly. Usually it will be in the form of sponsoring an event. That's about maybe 5% of our funding. And I think that's generally the range of funding sources. We have a modest endowment, so we get a little bit withdrawn from the endowment every year that also goes into the funding.
We also occasionally get awards through lawsuits. So if there was a class action, it's called a Cypre Award. So if there was a class action and the not everybody like sent their little thing in for their 50 cents or whatever, there's a pot of money remaining at the end. And sometimes if it's a privacy lawsuit, then the lawyers on each side would get together and sometimes they would pick EFF to get some of the money. So we sometimes get decent chunks of money through there. And we also like sometimes win our own fees in FOIA cases that we bring. We'll win our own attorney's fees when we bring those cases, and those can be they can be pretty substantial depending on how long we've been litigating the case. So and then I think we also do Amazon Smile donation. Like that's pretty small, but that's a thing.
Get tens of thousands from that.
Yeah, well, that's not
not
small.
And all of this is up on our website in the annual report, which I think is a very well done report. I used to be a reporter, so I'm pretty critical about those kinds of things, and I think ours is pretty well done.
And I should say too, and I think, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think that we're over 50% funded by small donations and through our members. So thank you, everyone who's a member.
Thank you for everyone who's here who's a member. Thank you so much, whoever donated. Thank you again. And we really appreciate getting the small membership support. That is just really, it's great to have that kind of grassroots support. And also it's very useful in our advocacy when we go speak to like legislatures and say, we have this many members. It gives us a little bit more credence when making, why should you listen to us?
Yeah. Every state legislation letter that I send is, we have over 30,000 members, including this many in your state. So very helpful.
There was someone over here.
Yeah, so we have a question in the back here, and then you said there's someone in the front there?
Yeah, there's
Someone on the far side.
All right, I'll need your help pinpointing them when I run back down, but here you go.
Oh, there.
Can you hear me? All right. To what degree has Tor eroded over time, if at all?
Eroded?
Yeah, have any of the computational non-triviality elements of Tor eroded in any way to your knowledge, especially with endpoints in Western Europe and the United States?
I don't have any knowledge at the moment of Tor being eroded. Essentially, over time, Tor has been developed as a network that, has been hosted and volunteered by many different nodes, exit nodes, entry nodes, and I think the entropy between all of them is definitely something to account for at times. And sometimes some sources are reliable and some sources aren't. There's been a lot of criticism in the past of the Tor network itself and funding resources and things of that nature, but for the most part, I haven't heard of anything being eroded in particular. Is there a particular event you're referring to?
Addressing rumors and concerns.
Rumors and concerns. Well, right now, there hasn't been anything that comes to light in particular as far as like vulnerability disclosure. And I work particularly with the Tor browser, so I can only speak for the circuits that go within that as like someone who works with them, not necessarily on behalf of the Tor network. So I'm not speaking on behalf of them. I'm speaking as somebody who works with them on a daily basis. And since HTTPS Everywhere, the web extension I work with, is packaged within the Tor browser, normally they have a lot of volunteers, people that look over things all the time, patch things all the time. They have a really vast volunteer network. In terms of the reliability of the nodes themselves, they've been doing a better job of documentation of how to create entry and exit nodes for the most part. And a lot of it, I would say, if any erosion has occurred, there's a lot of websites out there that do block Tor nodes. So that has been something that's been more, I would say, apparent that I've noticed over time, especially in the past 2 years or so. A lot of endpoints will block known Tor exit nodes. Whether or not that's something that's considered a practice that should be put in play from different services, especially site reliability services. I'm not quite sure what they are told in terms of blocking Tor nodes. I don't know if they're talking about blocking malicious traffic. Tor often gets labeled as malicious traffic in certain cases. So I would say that in that respect, I can speak and say that's what I've seen on my end so far.
Mm-hmm. I would also add that the Tor developers often say that compromised nodes are in their threat model, and Tor still works with that in mind.
There's some over here.
All right. So I think we have 1 minute left, but let's get at least one more question in here.
Oh, right there. I mean, if you guys want to stay, since you're the last session, you can keep taking
All right, we can take a few more questions.
Yeah,
after
there's
that.
another,
Super.
there's a woman back there with a question.
Excellent, let's get it.
So earlier today, the EFF Twitter account made a post regarding facial recognition technology. Washington State currently has some facial recognition technology bills in debate, and I've given those a review. They're not as strong as I would like. Do you have comments you'd like to share on that, on other states involved in this, and what's going on?
Oh, how much time do you have? So you're absolutely right. So Washington does have, they have a couple of bills in the running right now. There is a bill that is sponsored by the ACLU of Washington that we actually think it is fairly strong and that we do like. That is a moratorium on government use of face surveillance across the state. Until the legislature deems that it would be okay again to restart it. So we are a fan of that bill. There is a general sort of, they call it a GDPR light bill. I would disagree with that characterization, but there is a consumer data privacy bill in Washington that includes regulation of face recognition. We do not feel that that is a strong bill. I have been working a lot over the past couple of weeks with folks at the ACLU of Washington and other national privacy groups around the country to oppose that bill. It is past the Senate. It is in the House committee right now, and we are working on comments for that. So, but yeah, I would say in general, biometric surveillance moratoria bills are popping up in a lot of places across the country. Of course, we've seen a lot of work on that at the municipal level. So San Francisco, Oakland, for example, both have ordinances that ban government use of face surveillance in their cities. And we are starting to see that bubble up to the state level. But there are also a lot of people who do not want to see moratoria or bans. And so, they're trying to regulate around it. But we feel that this is a technology, particularly when used by the government, that is just, first of all, not ready for prime time, is not accurate enough in a lot of ways, and also is so invasive that we need to really stop use of it in our communities and have serious conversations about it.
All right, a couple more questions.
Good. So I'm an aspiring cybersecurity lawyer, so this is for Jamie. Could you give us a little more insight on what you do and how to go about getting into that field of law?
Ooh, interesting. Sure, yeah. Are you in law school?
No, I'm still in college.
Okay. Oh, maybe you said that. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the way that I ended up at EFF is I just kind of pursued things that I thought were interesting until, and I was particularly interested in privacy issues when I was in law school. But yeah, I think following the legislation involving security and encryption, I think getting in touch with the security research community is always a good idea. Learning the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and why it's terrible, it's a nice idea. I don't know, Kurt, do you have any other thoughts?
Well, I think you got a clerkship.
Oh yeah, you could do that.
A fellowship, right?
Yeah, you had a fellowship?
Yes, I did. I applied for EFF for a fellowship, and that's how I ended up here. And then I became a staff attorney. So yeah, I think pursuing nonprofit work at places like the EFF. I think the ACLU also does things. There's a lot of organizations on the East Coast to look into to do this kind of work.
All right.
There's a woman up there who's been very patient.
Yeah, there's been somewhere about halfway up.
Yeah, about halfway up, yeah.
Hiya. Recently, the Russian Federation announced that they'd be developing an internal network similar to how the DARPAnet is for the U.S. government, but a civilian form. Does the EFF, if it's the case that the Russian Federation is successful with this model, and other countries look to them as a form of adoption, does the EFF have any plans to resist an eventual balkanization of the entire internet into local state forms to destroy all privacy as we know it?
So, shall we destroy all privacy as we know it? No.
No, I'm just being exaggerating.
The issue you're raising is balkanization of the internet. I think actually China was really taking the lead there with having a very strong firewall surrounding it. And Russia has I'm not familiar with this DARPA-like project, but for a while they've had some laws on the books saying that you had to locally host information, which is the step towards creating that to try and have it so that you could. But this actually hasn't been limited to more authoritarian regimes like China and Russia. The EU for a while was like, should we have our own internet? Because they were more concerned about some of the consumer privacy issues that were arising. Ultimately, the solution to that was the GDPR and try and regulate the American companies on consumer privacy. But at least maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they were still talking about creating a separate European internet. I think these ideas are generally bad ideas, and that one of the advantages of the internet is the free flow of information. I mean, it can be good, can be bad, but on the whole, it seems to be for the best. And then when particular regions are insisting on having sort of everything in their jurisdiction, that makes it very tough for the civil liberties of the people inside that jurisdiction, especially in cases where it's a authoritarian regime, often where they will not have to go through any serious legal checks or getting a judge to weigh in before gaining information. In many cases, the government owns the telecommunications infrastructure, and if the material is on their networks, then it is really easy to find out who an opposition figure is, who is something that's an irritant to the authoritarian regime. So we certainly think these are a bad idea. I would say like our ability to influence the Russian government is limited. So we can tell them it's a bad idea, but they may not listen. But some of the things that are still useful is technology to try and work around that. Like the Tor project can help people sort of disguise where their IP is from and may be able to get outside of those jurisdictions. There are people who build bridges outside of the Chinese firewall. So there are some interesting technology projects to at least provide people with an escape route from a restricted internet. And in places where there is more of a rule of law, one thing I thought was interesting, that in Turkey, for a while, they had a ban on Wikipedia because they didn't like some of the things that Wikipedia was saying. And that was ruled to be unconstitutional under the Turkish law to block that. So that seemed to be like a good move for understanding that things that outside of that local network were valuable resources, and blocking access to them was a civil liberties problem. But on the negative side, in some places where even having a VPN on your technology, on your laptop or your mobile phone, can be cause for suspicion, even if they don't know that you're using it to access some of these additional resources. So it's an ongoing struggle.
There's some people over here.
I'm curious if you are taking up any initiating any activity with regard to election security and social media, with respect to this idea that social media is now essentially maybe equivalent to broadcasters like radio and television, and should they fall into the 1932 Telecommunications Act, or if there's any other strategies that you're, or ways you're taking up the fight with this regard to disinformation, election security, and so on. It's being, traversing through the social media platforms.
Okay. Say a few things.
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to.
On election security, we've looked at actually mostly on the security of the election systems and election infrastructure point of view. We've been working with some security researchers who want to be able to do research on those systems. But I think you're talking about sort of a different sort of thing with the disinformation aspects of it. And so we've done a lot of work on content moderation. One of the projects that we and several other civil liberties organizations did was the Santa Clara Principles, which were principles about how to do content moderation. And that is about all sorts of content moderation, including disinformation. So it's not targeted specifically about that, but as good principles for it. So I'd say, a lot of times what we're worried about is over moderation there. That the freedom of expression will be overly limited by people's zeal to remove things. So we want to ensure that there are appeals processes and ways for people whose information was taken down inappropriately have a chance to make their case and say that why it shouldn't have been taken down. I think there are a lot of things that I think we could be concerned about with disinformation and how it can affect a public discourse. I don't believe that we don't have any current programs, at least, to push for having it regulated under as a broadcast medium or a telecommunications system. I would say, though, if you're there's a lot that goes with government regulation, and that involves a whole lot of trust that the government regulators will be doing a good job at it. And on terms of disinformation, there's actually like a lot of must-carry kinds of things for political ads where they couldn't, on a broadcast medium, take something down for having false information. And now there's a lot of companies being criticized for choosing not to take something down for having false information. But I think if it was under under the broadcast standards, there will actually be less options of choosing what goes up or doesn't go up in political ads.
One concrete example of something we've worked on related to this, and this is to Kurt's point about the overreach, is in California last year. I think it was last year. Maybe it was the year before. I don't know. Everything's mushed together.
You have to say what it is. And then
there was a bot labeling bill. Was that 2 years ago? Oh my God. Okay, so this was 2 years ago, and it was like a DMCA-inspired bot labeling bill. We don't like the DMCA. If you're familiar with us, you probably know that. There's a lot of things. So it overreached. It would cover any type of bot online and require it to be labeled. And of course, anyone who's a really bad actor wasn't going to pay attention to this. And so we worked with the legislator to try to, and we did actually successfully get them to narrow the bill to the types of, what is actually harmful is maybe like bots operating at scale to make people appear, like people with resources appear that they have way more reach and way more people that agree with them. They actually do, not just one-off people who like funny bots or poetry bots or something like that. And so for us, there were First Amendment implications, and we think that if they pass a law that was as broad as it was when it was initially drafted, it was going to create all sorts of First Amendment problems. So we worked with the legislator there to get them to narrow the bill, and they ended up passing a bill that went into effect last July. I think it's still kind of yet to be seen like how exactly it's going to work out in practice, but that's one place where, and we didn't just completely oppose it, we helped them narrow it in a way that we thought would be constitutional.
So unfortunately, we do have to stop now.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that hard cutoff, but everyone give a great round of applause for the EFF.
Thank you all. Thank you. It's so good to be here.